all for joining us today. I'm Candace Shively with Utah State University Extension. We also have Shatal joining us he's also with USU, and we are both associated with USU's Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, which is the organization that supports these events. This month we have Rick Malloy joining us. He is the Water Conservation Manager at Central Utah Water, and he's also the president of our Utah Water Conservation Forum. Today, Rick is going to share how the Central Utah Water Conservancy District has encouraged cities to adopt water efficiency standards by revoking incentives. So as always, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. At any point, if questions arise, please use that Q&A box and we will get to those at the end. And then I will email CEU information out to everyone after the event is done. And Rick, with that, I will turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Candace. It's good to see a big list of names and a bunch of people that I haven't met before, and hopefully I get a chance to interact with you more in the future. Let me go ahead and get my slides pulled up here. Can you see that okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again for the introduction, Candace. Again, I'm Rick Malloy, the Water Conservation Manager at Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Just real quick, a little bit about who we are. We're the largest wholesale water provider in Utah. Some of you are probably familiar with our district, others may not be, but we deliver a little bit more than 400,000 acre feet. We serve about 1.6 million people daily. We deliver treated water and non-treated water or secondary water for irrigation, for agriculture. We also deliver a lot of in-stream and environmental and fish flows. We have fairly large storage reservoirs that we operate. We also operate several hydropower facilities as well. Our service area covers the better part of 7 counties. We're also the primary diverter of Colorado River water for Utah. So we take that water out of the Duchesne or the Green River, the tributary, into the Colorado River, and bring that water all the way across the Uinta Basin and into the Great Basin, and which feeds the primary population along the Wasatch Front, that Utah County and Salt Lake County. They're on the left side of your screen where the majority of the population is. Real quick, a little bit of information about Utah. So Utah is one of those rapid growing states. If you're from here, then you know this all too well. We're increasing in population from roughly 3.2, we're now around 3.3, 3.4 million to roughly 5.4 million people in 2060, about a 66% increase. And our water supplies are not increasing 66%. And so it's a unique challenge that we have. Utah County is one of our largest growth areas that will experience 30% of growth in just that one county alone. And there's certainly not enough water at the current use to support that kind of growth. The other kind of challenge that we face is household size is decreasing from 3 to 2.5 by 2060, which is bad news if you're measuring things in gallons per person per day. It also means that each home with some sort of landscape, whether it's large or small, has to be divided differently among that population. Let's see. So I talked a little bit about water supply. I think this is a good visual to show kind of where we're at today and where we're headed. So if you look at that, the red line, that makes some assumptions that nothing is going to change. We're going to continue to use water the same way we used it in 2015. Now, we know that there's already been a lot of conservation efforts that have taken place, and we've changed the way that we use our water. We've also changed the way we're growing. Many of you are probably well aware of the affordability and the cost to purchase land and to buy a home. We know that people are putting larger homes on smaller lots, and that has certainly changed our water use among our growing population. And so really what we're looking at is more of that baseline system demand, that light blue line kind of in the middle. And we say, okay, that's kind of where we're projecting the water use to go. But we know that that's not going to be enough to get us out very far. You can see that probably somewhere around 2050, we run out of water supply. And this is just looking at water supply in the Wasatch metro area, so the Salt Lake City area. If we look at it for Utah County, it's going to be very similar. If we look at it statewide, similar, but there are some areas like down south in southern Utah where they're going to run out of water much sooner if things don't shift, if we don't make some changes. So recently, the State Division of Water Resources, who published this graph as well, released their regional conservation goals. That's the RCG, that lower green line. Again, that's to even push us out a little bit further. And certainly we'll probably need to be more aggressive than that in order to continue to grow. I do want to highlight on the right, there's a little bit of variability in that right side. There's potential agriculture conversion within our municipal systems that could provide additional water supply. We say potential because agriculture seems to be something that is valued in our municipal systems, and so we don't want to necessarily count on that water supply. The other thing is that you can see that there's a kind of that dotted line that trends down, and that's potential diminished supply due to climate change. So to drill in that a little bit further, we know that climate change is occurring, and that usually comes in the form of temperature increases. This last year, we broke several records that we don't want to break, including some tracks for the number of days at Salt Lake Airport above 100 degrees. I think we were around 30, and the last record was somewhere around 20. So we're definitely getting warmer. Also, we had broke records for the hottest day in September. I think it was 104 degrees along the Wasatch Front in September, which is very abnormal, but something that we're seeing a trend for. And what does that mean? That means that we will have a higher evapotranspiration rate, lengthened irrigation seasons, which all translates to a higher outdoor demand. And you can see the figure on the left shows, the majority of our water occurs in those summer, or water use occurs in those summer months. And so as that gets hotter, we have less precipitation. There's a greater need for supplementing the water deliveries for those landscapes or for other irrigation purposes. And so that's a concern, and we see that as that diminishing water supply. So real quick, what does our water use look like? We always like to point the fingers at other water users to say, well, we're not the primary use, but in our service area, and so primarily in Salt Lake and Utah County, but throughout the counties that we serve, 44% of our water use is outdoor residential, another 25% indoor residential, and the industrial and institutional and commercial makes up the rest of that, and that includes their indoor and outdoor water use. And one of the reasons why outdoor residential water use is so high is, if you look at the figure on the right, through thousands of water check data that's been done throughout our service area, we found that on average, people use about 60 inches of irrigation a year, when they probably only need about 30 inches of irrigation to maintain their turf grass. And so there's a lot of overwatering happening. So there's a lot of opportunity also to curb that water use and help plan for the future. The other kind of benefit with that is it does provide us some ability for drought response. So this last year, most of the communities that we provide water to delivered 15 to 20% less water, which was a huge benefit. But the reason they were able to do that is because they implemented either watering restrictions or watering guidelines to reduce that outdoor water use. And so that does provide us a little bit of flexibility with those landscapes. So I did mention the regional conservation goals, just to give you a quick picture or an idea of what those are. If you look at kind of the Salt Lake City, Utah County area, they're kind of in the heart of Utah. The 2015 numbers were in the low 200s, and our goal is to bring that well below 200 with a state average of 16% reduction there. And like I said, we will likely need to be more aggressive as we approach 2030. I see these numbers even getting larger in terms of our percentage of reduction. And we've had a fairly good response so far. So we have started tracking per capita use since the year 2000. And we've seen on average in our service area about a 37% reduction in per capita use since the year 2000. So we've made really good progress. It probably seems really high to some areas of the state. And so I do want to provide a little disclaimer about per capita comparison. It's a great metric for measuring conservation efforts, but it's not a really good standard or a good metric to compare to other agencies. And one of the reasons for this is there's not really a standard for calculating gallons per capita per day. You would think that you just take the water use and divide it amongst your population, divided it by 365, and you'd have a number. But there's actually a lot of variability in how people calculate. Some people calculate the population based on the most recent census data. Some people are basing it upon current population numbers. So that could be, we just had a census. So that's probably fairly close, but the further away you get from that, the more unreliable that population number is. And then water use is calculated differently. Probably the easiest way to think about it is, here in Utah, if we, I like to think of it in terms of money. If we if we withdraw $100 from our bank account to go grocery shopping, and we spend $50 at the grocery store, and we go back and we deposit $50 back into the bank, we've spent $50. Well, the way that Utah calculates it is based on diversion. So we would show that we have spent $100 even if we put some back in the bank, where areas like Southern Nevada, they get credit for the water that they put back into the system. And we all know that our indoor water use, we can reuse and put that back in the system, whether it's the Great Salt Lake or Lake Mead or wherever it's going, we can return that indoor use with over 90% being reused and put back into the system. And so there are some apples and oranges comparisons there. So I do want to caution against comparing one state versus another. So what are we going to do about it? We've talked about the goals, but how are we going to get there? We anticipate spending, and this is a total spend throughout the state, roughly $2 billion on water conservation by 2030. And this is critical to meeting that goal. And so we may need even more than that. And then an additional $7.4 billion by 2070 spent on conservation just to meet the needs of our growing population. And how is that money going to be spent? Well, we've got several different programs. Historically, we've always ran a smart controller rebate. At this point, we've probably done close to, over 10,000 rebates. I think we're nearing 15,000 rebates statewide. We also do a toilet rebate program. One thing that's unique about Utah is we try to be as collaborative as possible. And so we have one site that helps serve the entire state of Utah for water efficiency rebates, and that's utahwatersavers.com. And so we'll talk about the different programs that we have, but we try to put all of them on this site so that everybody knows where to go, and it's not as confusing, hopefully not as confusing. Some other programs that we have a Flip Your Strip and a Localscapes rewards program. And these are our kind of turf removal or turf incentive programs. Flip Your Strip is an incentive dedicated to removing that little grass strip between the sidewalk and the street that's horrible to irrigate efficiently, and usually is a pain to maintain from a grass perspective. And so we offer an incentive. Currently, we're offering up to $1.25 per square foot for that program. And the Localscapes rewards is kind of a more all-encompassing design for your front yard or for your backyard. And we've had a lot of good response. We have classes surrounding these programs, and we offer a pretty good incentive for that right now. Just to give you a quick look, and I apologize, I tried to get updated graphs put together before this meeting, but these numbers are about a month old. We compile these numbers at the beginning of every month. But we've had roughly this year almost 1,000 applications for Flip Your Strip, with a good chunk of those already have completed their project. We give them 6 months to complete their Flip Your Strip project. The other one for their Localscapes rewards, we're almost at 500 applications now for this program. And so they've just kind of taken off and been really successful. We also have a landscape leadership grant. This is really a landscape program, turf removal program for commercial properties, for HOAs, institutions. We've had also a really good response with this. We most recently worked with a bunch of car dealerships, gas stations, cities. We've had a few city parks and city medians changed over. We see this program only continuing to grow. We cap these projects at about $100,000 and pay about $1 to $1.50 per square foot on these projects. But we're changing all of what we've done in the past. We're trying to, or we're getting ready to implement new programs coming spring of next year. We're focusing heavily on making them easier to apply, making the application process smoother, and then also reducing the amount of staff time it takes for each application. We want to make it very streamlined. We're also looking at, we're planning to double the incentive amount. So for Flip Your Strip, we'll likely pay a minimum of $2, and then the programs just go up from there in terms of the funding, and that puts us closer in line with other areas that have these types of programs. And so we're really excited for that. We've been rapidly working on getting those set up for next year as well. So now that we've developed our programs, really what's the next step? And we know that we have to continue to improve. We know we've got to continue to develop effective programs. Just like I said, we're increasing the incentives. We'd love to double or triple the number of applications we get next year. We want to see this be successful, but we have a growth problem, and we don't want future growth we don't want to be chasing our tails. We don't want every new home that gets built to be built with a park strip that then we have to incentivize down the road to rip out. So we've been looking at landscape ordinances and water efficiency standards. And so I'll talk a little bit about what those are. So we have been working with all the cities within our service area to develop, or we've developed landscaping standards that then we've provided to them. They apply to everybody. There isn't a sector that's carved out. In the past, we've tried to focus in one area over another, but this is, whether it's private developments, HOAs, developer installed, municipal projects, everybody has to adhere to these landscaping standards. There's irrigation requirements, assuring that the irrigation is designed for the highest efficiency, and making sure that spray irrigation is for lawn, and everything outside of those lawn areas that we use drip irrigation. We're using best management practices for irrigating on slopes and with different soil conditions, and making sure that things are separated by hydrozone, making sure that we have smart controllers put in these new landscapes. We want to ensure the success and that of these new landscapes, and that they continue to look good. So we know that the key to a good looking landscape is having good mulch for weed control, also protecting the soil and keeping moisture in the soil, and improving the appearance of those landscapes. We also have plant coverage requirements. What we don't want to see is a xeriscape with no vegetation whatsoever in the landscape. We are fortunate in the climate, at least in our service area, where we have a lot of plants that grow really well with minimal irrigation. We can have a very palatable landscape with lots of vegetation with very little water. And so we want, at least for our programs, to have a good amount of plant coverage. So if somebody removes some turf, we want to see some vegetation come back, be put back in those areas. And that helps to also avoid heat island effects or other adverse effects from just installing hardscape. We do have lawn requirements. We don't want to see any lawn on slopes of greater than 25%. Probably the biggest one that we challenge and that we want to see a change in is we don't want to see any lawn in areas less than 8 feet wide. Many will know that the irrigation equipment that's designed for areas less than 8 feet wide is not very good. And we change the effectiveness of our irrigation and the equipment that we have when we start to create these little small spaces, and we certainly get a lot of overspray and waste in those areas as well. And so we really kind of bear down on that number specifically. We also don't want to see turf exceed 35% of the landscaped area. And this is also really important as we move forward. I know I mentioned Localscapes. The idea here is just to help designers, help developers, city planners kind of have a point to start from. We talk to a lot of city planners that aren't sure what a water efficient landscape is, or what it looks like, or what that means. And so we've created this Localscape to outline kind of best management practices from a design standpoint. And that is that we can still have lawn, but the lawn isn't the default for the functionality of your landscape. And so we have in this example, we have lawn as a central open shape. We have some gathering areas and activity zones and connecting everything with paths. And then whatever's left over is the planting areas. And I think that that's important to show. And this is probably a very excessive plan in terms of the number of plants. I don't think we would see that very often. But the point is that the default landscape is not turf. And that's what we've seen historically in Utah. They say, okay, we're going to blanket the landscape with turf, and then maybe we'll carve out a little section in the front yard for some plants, or maybe we put a few shrubs up by the house, or we put a few trees in the lawn. But the default is lawn. And so this is kind of turning that around and saying, no, let's think about where lawn belongs, and then let's fill in the rest of the landscape with other functions and needs and plants. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like this. I mean, this is something that's appealing to people in Utah. They still like to have lawn, but you can see that there's a lot of variety, and certainly I think this looks better than just straight lawn in this landscape. And in this situation, this home is using less than half the amount of water as a traditional landscape. So what are the implications for not adopting these standards? Well, as a district, we don't have, we have a lot of carrots at our disposal, but we don't have a lot of sticks. And so some of those that we can, some of those implications that we can administer, or we can say, okay, you're not going to get any more water from the district. If you've got a growing community, we have very little water left, and this is already developed water, but left to allocate among the cities that are growing, particularly in Utah County. And we're saying, if you don't have water efficiency standards, you're not going to get any more water. No more grants or funding from the district. And then the big one is the residents in your community are no longer eligible for landscaping rebates. And this is a really big opportunity for us as well. And then the state is also evaluating landscape standards and saying, well, we're probably not going to provide funding for those communities as well. And so there's kind of this trickle down impact of not adopting those water efficiency standards. And again, that's to get us to that green line. It's to help us stretch our current supplies as long as possible. And if our future growth isn't more efficient, then we won't be able to meet those supplies. And what are we going to do next? Well, we're actually going to market these programs. And so far, we've had probably a third of our municipalities that we deliver water to adopt the ordinance, or will adopt the ordinance by the end of the year. We've kind of told them that that's the deadline. And those areas that have not adopted the ordinance, we're going to actually market those programs, the residential programs, to those communities in hopes that they go to apply. And when they go to apply, we'll put a big sign there that says, these are not available in your service area. If you'd like to know why, here's the reasons, and contact your local leaders and tell them that this is important. If you're familiar with Weber Basin up north in the Weber-Davis area, they have done this same thing, and they say, look, these programs aren't available unless you adopt water efficiency standards, and they've had significant adoption in their service area as well. And so we're hoping that we've given everybody a little taste of the programs. We have data to show each community how many people have participated, how many people want to participate. And so we know that this is an effective tool at driving change, and certainly local leaders will have to respond to why they haven't adopted ordinances in their area. And I know I ran through that really quickly, but happy to take questions. It seems like there was a few questions that popped up, and happy to discuss anything and everything. So yeah, thanks again, Candace, for letting me present this.
Yeah, Rick, we appreciate your time. That was great. We have a lot of questions coming through. If you guys do have questions, please use the Q&A box versus the chat box. It just helps me stay organized. So our first question is from Dawn, and he is wondering if you are worried about, if you're being more aggressive on water restrictions, will that result in a lower use and lower revenue, which could also result in higher rates?
Yes. So one of the biggest concerns that we've heard from the municipalities that we serve water to is revenue. They're very concerned about how conservation will impact their ability to fund water projects or continue to, pay their bonds. One of the things that we have been offering to our municipalities that we serve is rate setting workshops. We follow the Alliance for Water Efficiency's rate model to where we can plug in different metrics. We can say, okay, if you conserve X amount of water, or because of drought messaging, you're going to reduce this amount of deliveries. How does that impact your rates, or how does that impact the amount of funding that you receive, and how can you adjust your rates or set rates to mitigate some of those issues? And so it's a really big concern, but we've been giving tools out there to hopefully mitigate some of that without impacting affordability. One of the things that we do in some situations very well, in other situations probably not as well, is tiered rates. So we look at a water budget model where we say, okay, this homeowner has X amount of gallons based on their lot size, based on the amount of landscape area that they have. And we say that, they need 100%, and that's what we're going to charge them at a very affordable rate. If they use more than 100% of what their water needs would be based on ET and lot size or landscape area, then we're going to go from paying, a couple dollars to $3, $4, $5. So it's going to be really, it's really going to penalize them. But that extra income from those who overuse can help offset some of the lost revenue for conservation.
Gotcha.
But good question.
Good answer. So Rick is wondering if you've had any issues with vandalism on the landscapes that have converted to more rock, like maybe people using the rocks to break windows.
So that's funny. We've had a lot of concerns, especially from cities where they have kind of municipal streets, and they go in and they change out some of their landscape to rock. But we really haven't seen as much as you would probably think. Probably the biggest concern that comes out of these changing landscapes has more to do with stormwater than it does with kind of vandalism, throwing rocks. That it just doesn't happen as much as we thought it would. But certainly there's concerns over the type of mulch material that's put in and the potential impacts to stormwater. And so we've worked with a lot of cities to create some best management practices in terms of, okay, we don't want to put really large bark material that during a rain event can flood out onto into the gutter and clog up storm drains. So there's some material that's better for that. We try to do fine mulch. One of the things we recommend is no weed fabric. The more weed fabric that you put in, the easier it is for the material that's on top to kind of flow out of those areas. And so particularly in a park strip is where it becomes a concern. But yeah, good question.
Great, thank you. Do you know when the last reservoir was built in the state?
I don't know when the last reservoir in the state. The last reservoir that we had built was Jordanelle, or the last one that was completed was Jordanelle Reservoir, and it's 22 years old, 23 years old. So I know that there have been some recent changes to reservoirs in terms of increasing capacity. So they've increased, or I guess, increased is the right word, the height of the dam to store more water. But I don't know of any really recent, at least large scale reservoir projects. Most of those kind of went away with the shift of federal funding. So there hasn't been a lot of federal funding until just very, very recently for these large scale water projects. So we haven't seen very many of them.
So do you know, are there any plans or is there any talk of creating more reservoirs to retain additional water?
So no, there is really, I mean, there are a few kind of pie in the sky, I guess, at this point, but I do know that as a state, at least right now with the situations with the Great Salt Lake, I doubt we'll see any more or any additional diversions or reservoirs that would potentially impact specifically the Great Salt Lake. In other areas, there may be some small scale reservoirs, but I just don't see it really happening. Also, there's a lot of environmental protections that make things a lot more difficult today than there was 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
Great, thank you. Do your new guidelines and ordinances also impact commercial and multifamily development? And if so, are they still allowed the 35% of the landscape area to be turf?
Yeah, so we do have recommendations for multifamily, and commercial. We actually have a lower percentage of allowable turf. We only allow 20%, but that excludes active recreation zones. So if an HOA comes in and they want to build a park, that park or that play field that surrounds that park would be excluded from the percentage. And then we would say in all other areas, a maximum of 20%. And we're probably going to decrease that or recommend a lower amount. What we're seeing, though, is that most commercial buildings are coming in now with zero turf. There's not a lot of reasons for a gas station or a car dealership to have any turf at all. And so we're seeing that kind of change there as well.
Great. With the Localscapes program, are there marketing materials for landscape companies that partner with the Localscapes program?
So yes, there are. We have a whole partnership, I guess, packet and program that we offer with Localscapes. And so partners, they can fill out a form and they can work with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District to become a partner. And then once they become a partner, they get access to kind of for lack of a better term, a file folder that has materials that then they can use. They have access to the logos and kind of the partnership logo that they can use in their own marketing materials. But they have to kind of, or they have to sign an agreement and things like that to say that they'll continue to represent Localscapes as it is intended.
Okay. And did you say there was information on their website?
There is information on the website, but you can also reach out to Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. They're the ones that kind of manage the partnership program for the entire state. And you can always reach out to me. My contact information is there on the screen, and I can get you in touch with the right person if you have any questions.
Okay, perfect. I'm also going to throw the Localscapes website in the chat box for anybody that might be interested.
And the Localscapes website is, we haven't updated it recently, but it's going to be going through some revisions and updates so that the partnership kind of section of that will be a little bit easier to navigate. And so as we send people there, we're hoping that they'll be able to filter by service area. So if you're in Davis County, it'll tell people kind of, oh, this is a contractor that's in Davis County. This is who I should call, and you're not getting phone calls from a different part of the state. So we're trying to improve that, and then also so that people know exactly what services those partners provide.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like Natalie has a question about their potential launch of a program. So she says, I know that you talked about how many applicants you've had in the last year, and she's wondering if you know approximately what percentage of the customers you've had apply in total.
Well, it's kind of skewed. So we have a higher level of participation in some areas over other areas. So Salt Lake City is by far the largest city in our service area, but they're also the largest participant in this program. I don't know off the top of my head what the percentages are, but we have seen that there are certain, I guess, sectors of the population that are more interested in landscape conversion. I guess maybe a random fact is transplants, specifically from California, seem to be our biggest customers. So they're the ones that have already kind of experienced landscape change and rebates, and they come and they're already on top of it. They're looking for programs. But in terms of percentage, it's probably pretty low. We serve 1.6 million people, and we've obviously delivered or had a very small percentage, but we've only been doing this a year. We anticipate that as we increase the incentives, we will drastically increase the number of participants.
Okay, Natalie, hopefully that question helps maybe ease some concerns you might have about keeping up with the applications. So Brady is wondering what have been the results of your rebates with regards to water savings?
That's a really good question. So we, as a wholesaler, because we don't have any direct retail customers, we don't get water savings data right away. And so what we do is we work with the municipalities and we provide them with the information for the applicants and where they're located. And that's something that the applicants agree to as part of the program, that will share that data with their water provider. And then we're about to kind of send all of that as kind of our programs taper down. We're still getting a few projects that are being completed even now. So once we get all of that data, then we'll send it off to those municipalities, and hopefully we'll start to get water savings data back. We do some calculations based on the square foot of turf that's removed, and we know how much water should be applied, not is applied, but should be applied. And we run some rudimentary numbers off of, this is how much square foot was removed of turf within our service area, and this is how much water we can, and we underestimate, this is how much water we can save over time. So we do have some of that data, but to get actual data, we're about a year behind on that as we work with those municipalities.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of questions just related to landscape design. So it sounds like Christine is a landscape designer that really focuses on Waterwise practices. And she's wondering, do we have a place in Utah where designers can share their designs or forward-thinking ideas, or a way that we promote landscape designers that have this mindset?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So probably where we've seen the best resource and community engagement is actually on Facebook. So there's a Localscapes work group for active participants or past participants to share kind of, here's what I've done. And we've had really, really good engagement with designers who showcase some of their designs, whether they're doing it to generate business or just to share ideas and get feedback. It's been a very active community, and we just kind of stumbled into that. But if you look up Localscapes on Facebook, there's a kind of a work group there that's probably the best tool right now to engage with kind of the end user or the public. If you're just looking at more of a professional engagement, probably the UNLA is the best group for that as well.
Cool. Those are great suggestions. This is an interesting question from Melinda. Do you give concessions? Okay, so with your tiered pricing, do you give concessions to historic properties that are on the historic register that may not be allowed to deviate from their existing landscape designs?
So we try to, at least what we promote is, because we want to see everything based on a water budget. And so we, at least at this point, we recommend that all cities that implement a water budget approach make some assumptions that everything is turf. And then they make things more stringent or strict for new development. So if a new property comes in with a water efficient landscape, their budget will be different than those that are, I guess, not participating in that type of development. So hopefully that provides a benefit, and we don't create an affordability problem for, like you said, historic buildings, areas where turf is goes beyond just kind of function, or there's some sort of cultural benefit, right, of that turf. And we certainly see that throughout the state. There's areas, I think of the Utah Capitol. If you didn't have that big lawn in front of that, how would that change the dynamic? Certainly we see that throughout the country, and we don't want to create affordability issues. So we have some tools, I guess, that we can use to help alleviate that. And then we offer a lot of incentives for people who want to change. And certainly we're not forcing that on anyone. So.
Cool. Thank you, Rick. And I think this final question, I think we could all probably give a little feedback on this. But Rick, if you want to start, what are some educational programs available to folks for selecting climate appropriate vegetation?
That is a really good question. We used to have a really beautiful garden in Utah County, but we had to move our location. And so we send everybody to the Conservation Garden Park in West Jordan, that's run and managed by Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. Certainly that is a huge resource where they have all of the plants labeled. They have plant database on their website. It's a great resource for finding plants that not only do well, but can be identified as native or non-native, but still are water efficient. Certainly a great resource. And I know Candace and Satal, you guys have a lot of resources of your own with USU as well.
Yeah, and Satal's putting several links in the chat box, so I'm gonna maybe I have some restrictions on. I'm gonna share those with everyone. Let's see here. I can't talk and copy and paste at the same time. There we go. There are, yeah, just to add to Rick's point, there are several conservation gardens throughout the state. If you're closer to St. George, the Red Hills Desert Garden is beautiful. For the most part, every county in the state has a Master Gardener program, which is it's offered through your local extension office, your USU extension office, and they talk pretty heavily about plants, and they provide you with a lot of great resources. And then again, Satal put a bunch of things in the chat box. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think if you look up USU website, or like even on the CUWCD website, there's a lot of resources. And as you said, conservation garden and USU, like counties, like, and still, if you have any problem, you could always reach out to folks at USU, like me, Candice, or anyone from CWEL.
Yeah, definitely. Great suggestion. Well, Rick, we really appreciate your time. That was a fantastic conversation and presentation. And to those that are joining us, I will email CEU opportunities out in just a moment, and we will get this up on YouTube so you can have a refresher if you would like at a later date.
Thanks Candice and Satal.
Thanks.
Hey, have a great day, guys.
Okay, have a good day, everyone. And thanks for joining. See you, Candice.
Bye.